So let's kick off. I'll ask you a question that I'm asking everybody, which is, how would you describe what kindness is?
Well, I think to me, kindness has a number of elements, from demonstrating compassion, integrity, so living true to your values and beliefs, that gratitude, being authentic to who you are, and within that authenticity, sort of demonstrating a vulnerability as well, because you have to be sort of open to other people's vulnerabilities to be able to actually have that kindness, but also open to your own vulnerabilities, and demonstrating that sort of like humility within that. I think another important aspect of kindness really is around having humor. To recognize, that within that sort of like self-reflection and self-empathy, you have to have that humor to actually come across in that compassionate way.
So tell me about the relationship between kindness and your work in inclusion.
I think, having been a equality, diversity and inclusion practitioner for over 20 years now, kindness really has showed itself to be an essential characteristic. So when you're embracing that sort of cognitive diversity, when you're checking biases, when you're trying to open up people's eyes to those invisible discriminators, and working in that sort of alleged victim and perpetrator dynamic, it's really essential. So in order to sort of like foster that sort of belonging, when it's an ever more diverse team that you've got around you, that kindness really helps to build that connection. So it sort of allows individuals then to be the most authentic versions of themselves, which is what you want. You want people to be able to bring their whole selves to work. I think being kind means living your values. And demonstrating that humility, and really standing up for what is right, however hard that might be. And I should say that's something which a lot of employees really do demand now within their workplace.
And so, do you think, and this could be a work, but this can be for any part of your life, do you think you can ever be too kind?
Personally, no.
Good, yeah.
That's why I'm here. Yeah. I think I was often told that I was too kind. Right. So, but I often think that it's often confused with being too nice.
Yeah.
And for me, that's often used to hide fear. Being nice is something which can often be a mask. So when you don't want to face the tough conversations or do sort of the brave work that's required. So being nice, I think, can be seen as a sort of weakness within work and leadership. But it can also sort of like demonstrate a culture where maybe sort of trust, honesty, humility and compassion are not valued as well. So being nice, I think, is something of which, if you take that to one side and think about being kindness actually involves a lot of strength of character. It means dealing and confronting with others and your own vulnerabilities, and approaching any situations with that wholeness of heart. And that can be daunting for many people. Many people sort of like need you to respond to situations in an authentic, wholehearted way for the goodness of the individual and the organization. But we also have to be aware that kindness has different meanings for different people. So depending on your individual background, your cultural background, your age, your environment, it can mean very different sort of like things as well. So yeah, being too kind, for me personally, from my viewpoint, no, you can't be.
Which I think that plays really nicely into my next question, which is, what are the barriers you think about adopting kindness in the workplace?
All work cultures are very varied. And that's something I think in the 22 years I've been an ED&I consultant, you sort of realize that there's maybe two barriers which come up a great deal. First one is what we're saying about the fear of being vulnerable. So that fear of basically removing a mask to being your authentic self, and potentially showing weaknesses to sort of like the in-group or not fitting in with the majority group. And then the second one really is sort of around unconscious biases. So the perception of yourself and others, and how to be professional. So again, it's saying that performative professionalism that's often based on those structures that you can't see, those that base of the iceberg that you can't see. So I often hear things like, that's just not the way that it's done here, or they won't like that, you know, that'll make them vulnerable. Well, I believe in business that we have to be vulnerable, and that's something which Dr. Brené Brown has researched and championed and written many books about, of which I really believe that we have to have that courageousness in leadership, and that's what's been lacking. And in order to have that courage, we have to really face our fears and be vulnerable and understand what that means to be vulnerable. They're sort of, you know, intrinsically linked in that way. So without sort of like challenging others with kindness, really sort of like people, organizations, teams, they're not able to progress. And with time, they will just become obsolete if they don't change and adapt to the times. Like you were saying, my dad had a phrase as well, which I expect everyone will know, you know, sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind. And even I hate the term cruel. I definitely believe you have to be brave, tough, courageous in order to be kind. So whether it's doing something like telling something to somebody which they maybe don't want to hear, and rather than running away from that conversation, actually having that conversation, or telling someone no rather than kicking a project into the long grass, or taking on the majority biases and the group discriminators. You know, being kind can be tough, and I think it's just necessary for the individual and the organisation to be that way.
Okay.
Take care, Magnus.
Right,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Bye.